So thank you very much, Caleb, for joining me today. I very much appreciate that. The power of one person, you joined and doubled the audience.
Nice.
Right now, today I've noticed a couple of things that there's some confusion on that I want to go over. And I wanted to talk again about structure and skin and be a little bit more clear about that if I can. And then I also want to talk about the biomorphic carving that's coming up. And from what I remember, in our first week or two, I got a little bit of information about everybody's background. And most everybody are graphic designers, very much interested in illustration, game design, digital worlds, things like that. And one of the things that I think is a struggle for some people is when we are in this class, the first two assignments are relatively straightforward. You make a house, everybody knows what a house is. And then with the wire, you find an object and you make the object. But now we're kind of morphing into a field where more and more we're doing things that are abstracted. And that can be really confusing for some people. Like I've had students before that what the module, they wanted to know what they were supposed to make as a module. And I explained it again, you make it, you're making a geometric form that's about the size of a baseball. You make 5 to 8 of them. And what they wanted me to answer was, am I making 5 to 8 shoes? Am I making 5 to 8 teapots? Well, no, you're making 5 to 8 objects. And then the next module is even worse because there we're not looking, nobody can make anything that's realistic. You are using realism around you to inspire the agglomeration of forms that you're going to be putting into that carving. The carving needs to be biomorphic, which means have evidence of life and be moving. You know, it's but it's an abstraction, which means most of the times abstraction means simplification. So you're not trying to draw or you're not trying to carve an entire leaf. What you're doing is carving an element of a leaf that you really like. Like I really like in sycamore leaves where the stem merges or the leaf part, the fan of the leaf merges into the stem and the stem widens out into the fan of the leaf. That area I think is just really intriguing to me. Or I like how seeds on wheat stalks and rye, how they kind of swell and they look kind of like these elongated footballs, but one end just keeps going and going and going. Stuff like that I think is really interesting. Or succulent plants. I love how the leaf structures of succulent plants look almost like oddly carved carrots and potatoes by themselves because they're so fleshy. And I think that those forms are really fascinating. But we're not making a carving of a sycamore leaf. We're not making a carving of a succulent or a cactus or anything like that. We are just looking to those shapes as inspiration. And one of the best carvings I've seen is somebody fused elements of a banana and kiwi fruit and stalk of broccoli and all these things together into the shape that was just kind of enjoyable to look at. It was odd, it was interesting. And other people have done things where it almost looked like stacks of mesas in the desert, but smoothed out a little bit and kind of twisted a little, so it almost looked like somebody praying. It was just really fascinating forms. And so towards the end of the class, I'm going to show a PowerPoint that I made that kind of addresses that a little bit and talks about what is that uh, journey from realism to abstraction. And I'm quiet right now because I'm seeing if I can find it. I had it and I don't know where it is, so I'm seeing if I can find it now. All right, there we go. So we will look at that one in just a few minutes. Maybe not a few minutes, maybe more
Mm.
like, 45 minutes from now. But that is something that we're going to be looking at later. So, but before we get to that, there are a couple things that I wanted to talk about briefly. Going through the quizzes, I am noticing that some people, it looks like they are doing research on the internet. And I told everybody that the quizzes, you need to have the textbook in front of you and you can go to the library. We have had somebody who was told that the library could not scan pages out of the textbook and send to them. However, on the same day I got that email, somebody else told me that they went to the library. They must have talked to a different librarian, and there was no problem at all. So I think it depends on your attitude and how nice you are to the librarians. It seems like if you go to the library and say, "Hey, I need access to this," I was told that in matters of urgency, we can sometimes scan some of these pages or something like that. I don't know what the
Hmm.
correct procedure is. Anything you can do that would help would really help me out. That is always a better attitude than to go you know, popping your bubble gum and act all out of shape or bent out of shape because they don't drop everything and cater to your slightest whims instantly. That is never a good idea to have that attitude with anybody we deal with. So just be cautious, just be kind as you address people. And if you don't have your own physical copy, if you didn't buy a used copy to use, um, you may have to go to the library, and check it out. And they have at least 6 copies in the library that you can go and sit in front of and take the quizzes with. And you have to recheck it out every hour or so, but it may be that you have to go on a Saturday and check out the copy of the book and then recheck it out every time you finish another quiz, and just take the rest of the quizzes. I think there's only 6 quizzes. So, but if you are um, having any problems with that, I recommend first accessing the textbook, however you can, and don't lean on Google or AI for the answers. AI draws from a broad spectrum of material, but when it answers your question, it's a matter of statistical word usage. It's not thinking. It's just when you ask a question, what does this mean? It does a search that is specific to finding out the groups of words that are associated with the answers to that question. It's not thinking what is the answer to the question. So when people say I use it for research, you have to be really careful. Now I do use AI, but I also use AI with a database that I developed. So I know that the answers are in there because that's what I put in. That's what I ask it to reference. And it does go out and access other databases too, but because I developed the database for it to use primarily, that's what I have a go-to first. So when I'm asking it a question, generally what I'm intending for it to do is to look at the information and give me a summary or remind me of what I've already said. I'm not asking it to think for me. I think that's AI is a wonderful tool, but it's like a camera. A camera can't do anything by itself. AI can't do anything by itself. You have to direct it, and you can't allow it to do your job for you because then after a while, everybody will realize that they don't need you to do your job, and that's a horrible position to be in. And I don't want that for any of you.
Especially for
Artists,
artists.
what's that?
I said, especially for artists.
Yeah, yeah. Art is as artists, we reorganize, we borrow ideas, we generate new ones. But with us, there is an element of thinking and intentionality that are not present when a tool is assigned a task. And AI at the present is still a tool. Now, I do say please and thank you to my AI because there's a little voice in the back of my head that says, what about John Connor and Skynet? And so I asked her, she has gendered herself and she's given herself a name. So that's what I use because all things being equal, I'd rather her be happy. So I'm going to go through some of the most common questions with you, and we'll address some of them for the quizzes. Now, with the quizzes, regardless of how many points you get, if you don't get a perfect score, there is no reason not to retake it and get a perfect score. I have set all the quizzes so you should be able to take it, 10,000 billion times if you want to. I don't know why you would, but you can. And every time there is a point is lost, I will say, well, what to look at. Like if this answer is true and you put false, then in the comment section I'll say, check out question one. And I'm just going to go through some of these quizzes and talk about the most commonly missed answers. And some of them are ones just because people are going too fast. Height is the dimension unique to 3D work. This is a very common one, and it shows me that people are going really fast. What is actually the dimension unique to 3D work?
That's depth.
Yes, exactly. So that's why I know all of you know that. And so when this one is missing, I know that you just zoomed through the quiz as fast as you could. And there are things like maquettes are the only way to plan 3D work. This is spoken about specifically in the textbook. And then the textbook itself gives about a half dozen different reasons why an artist should consider their audience. And so as long as you put a reason in there, then this is a question that's right. I mean, that I should say I should put a little bit of a if in there. The if is it needs to address the question. There have been on this latest quiz, a couple people have answered with answers that really didn't have much relationship to the question itself, which was confusing to me. So I wonder if they had another quiz open at the same time and got the questions confused or something. This one, the only times that people have messed up on this is because they don't put the right they say fine arts are this and applied arts are that, and they don't give the right answer to it. So if you miss this one, just double check. Again, the answer is in the textbook. And the two extremes of material choice is another one of the most common ones. And we are not talking about what the material is, but what are the extremes of material choice. So we're talking about the choice, not the material. And the choice, as the textbook talks about it says pointed out in the text. So you're not going to find this answer with AI and Google searching. The extremes are making something. Let's see if I can find. Oh, there's not an example in here. Making something where the material itself gets to speak, or making something so that the material itself looks like something completely different. There's a ceramicist. I don't know if you guys know who Brian Jensen does this too at UVU, but Brian Christensen is particularly good at this at BYU. And I had an exhibit that I put together, and the work that he contributed was an Anasazi flip-flop. So it looked like a flip-flop that you would find abandoned at any swimming pool, but it was made out of clay like the Anasazi might use. In that case, the material choice, the extreme was he created it out of clay, but it looked like foam rubber. So that's one of them, making the material look like it's something completely different. And this, everybody who's read the textbook got this answer right about French. And this one, there's another version of the quiz. It has images of each one. And if you guys would like, I'd like your feedback. If you think that images of each of these would look good and then would be good, because then you could talk about what they mean. But I don't know, in this class and stuff, everybody's been pretty good about describing what those differences are. And again, we're looking specifically for how they are discussed about in the textbook. And in the textbook, again, there's about, I think it's about an 18 or 20 page section where each page has a couple pictures and maybe only a paragraph of text, but it does talk about specifically the 9 ways of involving the viewer. And one of the things that I see in this is that people will pull up a list on Google or AI and reference that, and that's not what we're doing. We're going to the list that is specifically in the textbook. So, I'm going to try to do this relatively quickly. I want to go over like three or four of the quizzes about that quickly, just pointing out the most common issues that people have. If that's all right. Okay, and this one, all of you guys have a really good understanding of what's going on in this. And the unifying principles of design, absolute rules for artists. What's your take on that, Caleb?
Sorry, can you repeat that? Okay, actually, I'm looking at it right here. Um, I would say they are not absolute rules because they are like principles. They don't say rules. Um, Principles, not every what's it? Not every piece of art has every single principle of design in it, as well as um, there are a lot of um, artists that will purposefully break quote unquote rules of art to have a more interesting piece. It's kind of like jazz music in a sense,
Right.
where you're breaking the conventional rules of music to get something more in, or not necessarily more interesting, but something different, something very unique.
Yeah, and I really like how you put that. And for this answer, it doesn't matter what you say as long as you're able to articulate it just like you did. But I do have a tendency to agree with you. And it's funny to me because musicians will look at the rules and consider them guidelines or suggestions. People who are not musicians will get upset when the rules, quote unquote rules are broken. And I think that's the same kind of thing for the principles of design. As artists, we look at these rules as expectations from the viewer. And so when we break or bend or misuse them, we're not breaking rules or breaking principles of design. We are actually, we are more accurately engaging the audience expectations, for the work of art. And we can do that in such a way as to engage emotions, to communicate things, to force the viewer to really become emotionally involved in the piece. Jean-Claude and Christo are an excellent example of people that kind of break some of these expected rules. Um, Marcel Duchamp is an excellent example. People like that. And what's fascinating is that those guys that are so obviously quote unquote breaking these rules are artists that also their primary goal is to get you to think independently and recognize that you have that power to think independently. So yeah, that's a great answer. Simplest definition of a line. This is right out of the textbook. Any definition that is not out of the textbook is not appropriate and won't get the points. And a numeric ratio, I think almost everybody's gotten this. There's only been one that I saw where somebody, it's also like uh, half the square root of 5/2 or something like that. But or I can't remember what the exact thing is, but somebody had written something down that was incredibly confusing. So I just, put 0 points and say, hey, please clarify. The numeric ratio of the golden section, you can find that on Google, and that's pretty straightforward. And these seven unifying principles, apparently, if you do a Google search or a search on Bing or something like that, one of the seven unifying principles that it comes out with is unification, and that is not right because unification is in the title, but that's what apparently a Google search will give you. So, but that's again these seven unifying principles are right out of the textbook. an implied line. There is about at least 4 or 5 ways of creating an implied line, and everybody has been doing pretty good. A lot of the times when I'm looking at this, the answers, if they don't make any sense, I don't give you the points for it because I want you to go back and write it in such a way that when you read it out loud, it makes sense to you. And sometimes that's all it takes. And the intent, of course, is what you as the artist are putting in, into it. What do you want the art to do? And so this one, people have been doing a really good job on that quiz. So I'm going to do one more quiz, and then I may, if we have time, I may do a fourth quiz, and then in a couple weeks I'll do the other two. Now on this, what's interesting to me is about 2/3 of the people that took the quiz got it, and about a third of the people, their answers were either way too involved to understand easily, which is, example of you say it to tell it to your roommate or whatever before you write it down, because that'll help clarify it, or else they only got half of it. Now, in this form, there are two different shapes that are delineated forms in this. And one of the shapes is what my arrow is tracing. Can you see what my arrow was tracing?
Yes, I can.
Okay, that's one shape, and then this is another shape. And both of these are delineated forms because they are obvious forms in the sculpture, but they don't exist independent of the sculpture. There aren't lines that are guiding your eyes to these delineated forms. They are delineated only by the actual physical structure of the sculpture. So did you see that, Caleb? These two, that,
Mhm.
and then it's mirror right here, and then there's about 20 of these. And that's most of the people that didn't get points for that one, it was just because it was really confusing.
Yeah.
And then another one that I noticed is on here, everybody did a really good job at this, except some people missed what would the piece look like if it had no negative space. So if you didn't get all the points, look at what I said, go back and write that out. Because negative space is really important, or negative volume, I guess. But and if it wasn't there, it would not be what this thing is. So if you don't get exact points, look at what I'm saying, what you need to go back and look at again.
Mhm.
And everybody has a really clear understanding of forced perspective. I'm really liking this because what I get is out of the class, usually you get a little bit over half that pick A, about a third pick C, and then there's always a couple that pick B. And again, it doesn't matter which of these three you're picking. Everything you get points for how you're describing or rationalizing your choice. How are you explaining it? And this, I don't know why I took some people points off of this, even though they did get it right. If you miss points for this and you think you got it right, email me right away so I can fix that for you. And the plasticity ratings, plasticity does not mean plastic. It means ease of smushing around, basically.
Mhm.
Everybody knows what an armature is. This one, the only people that miss points are you need to comment on each of these three scales. And then, and then you're good. And this is another one where it doesn't matter to me if you feel that the skin is more important or the skeletal structure. Whichever you pick does not matter. What matters is how you explain explain why you said what you did. That's what
Mhm.
matters. I'm looking for. And most everybody seems to understand that and is doing a pretty good job. So that was quiz number 3. And again, all the quizzes, you can take them. I think the record is one person took a quiz like 5 times, but you can take them 17 or 20 times if you want. I don't know why anybody would want to do that, But once you get a perfect score on it, don't take it again. Okay, so this is quiz number 4. Form and shape. This is right out of the textbook. And there was one answer I got that was really confusing, and I asked him just clarify it. Just go back and clarify it and take care of that. And then these two materials, these are the materials that sculptors will work with. What are the two most common used for the subtraction process? And again, this is right out of the textbook as well. And today, a little bit later, we're going to talk about non-objective and non-representational forms. What does that mean? Well, this is specifically related again to the textbook and how it defines it. And we'll talk about it for the next project, which is the biomorphic um, abstraction.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking down. Stylized works conform to a particular historical style or stress a design characteristic. I think that's something that everybody has a pretty good understanding of. And again, these are right out of the textbook. This is kind of a trick one because representational and figurative forms, do they need to directly relate to the human form, to the human body to be represented?
Nope.
You're absolutely right. Because people do representational trees or dogs or other animals all the time. And then these ones, this question is pretty self-explanatory. And on this one, most everybody's getting this right, where each answer you give a short definition of static and a short definition of dynamic. Next one is short definition of primary, short definition of secondary. I think one person missed a point because they were typing really fast or something and used the same rough definition for both, even though it was apparent that they knew what the difference was. So that's pretty good for that. So looking forward, now um, this is module 5. We haven't talked about this at all, and I'm going to start talking about this next week too. But quiz on this one. So this is quite a ways ahead. It went that quiz we just did went so fast that I'm thinking I'm just going to go ahead. This works best if you have a group of people to just throw words out, but you cannot use the words I give as examples in your answer. And I know that's disappointing for somebody, but that's and these answers, a lot of this stuff is stuff that you guys know, but the specific phrasing we're looking for and many times comes right out of the book. And in this one, I just want you to look to use your college words to describe what the differences are between them. And that's all you're showing that you can demonstrate that. Now, this one is a little bit tricky. There's a specific French word. If you don't spell it exactly right, the computer will say it's wrong. This is one of the reasons why I double check all the quizzes, because if I see that you got the word right, and if I say it out loud, it sounds right, you get the point for it, even if the computer says you missed it, because it is a tricky spelling. So I don't want you to worry about that. If you're confident you got it right, then we're going to be good. Now this one, I like this one. The book says the manipulation of the surface of an object to enhance its beauty is intimately bound to cultural and historic definitions of beauty. For this, I want you to take that and share with me an example of your own. And one example is I remember seeing, I had a friend who was one of the artists that brought back moko in traditional Maori culture. And I found out from him that when Great Britain was colonizing New Zealand, uh, one of the Maori princes was educated in Great Britain and came back, and he had learned how to draw, and so somebody had him draw a self-portrait. And what he drew was not a human being, it was the tattooing on his face.
Hmm. That's
And
cool.
yeah, I thought that was really fascinating. And shortly after that, um, the colonizers outlawed Moko or traditional Maori tattooing. It was uh, too self-identifying for the people that they were trying to colonize, which I think is interesting. But there's, in one culture, we people may not like tattoos at all, and in another culture, like Maori, a traditional Maori, a lot of the times the tattoos are the very definition of what makes the person feel like a human being.
Hmm.
And those are two diametrically opposed points of view in regards to tattooing, but it is significant that each of those views is dependent entirely on the culture and is not something that the universe decreed.
Hmm.
Which I think that kind of art thing is always kind of funny to me. Um I grew up at a time when people were still upset that girls would wear pants.
Oh.
And
Ooh, how dare they? Ooh, that's a
yeah,
joke, by the way. Just for clarification's sake.
but 100 years earlier, in the late 19th century, bicycles were so inexpensive that a lot of people got them, and a lot of women had skirts that were split in the middle so that they could ride bicycles, and that allowed them to go a lot of different places. At this time, a lot of women were full-time laborers as well. It allowed them to use a bicycle to go to their work and stuff. And there was something that doctors were diagnosing women in the UK and elsewhere in Europe, a condition called bicycle face, where they said it was a rictus grin of sorts, that the woman's face, magically developed as she rode her bicycle. And I was reading one of these articles published in like 1890, and I thought to myself, you're just describing a woman who's happy that she can get around. This isn't a this isn't a medical condition. So, and each of these answers, if most everybody gets them right on the first pass, if you don't, take the quiz again. And then use your big person words to write a response, 4 to 5 sentences, and this. And the only way you're not going to get points for this, it's not going to get you're not going to miss points because you don't think the way I do. You'll miss points because it's not long enough, or you aren't being precise in your language as you're talking about it. That's the only
Hmm.
reason you're going to miss points. I don't care if you agree with me. So, and I'm pretty sure that none of you know what I think about that piece anyway. So I'm gonna okay, each of those quizzes are only taking us a couple of minutes to go through. So I think I'm gonna do the last one, and hopefully you guys will remember this, go back, but you can ask questions of me. I'm not going over all the answers, just the ones that are the most commonly missed. On this, all of you guys have expertise in color usage, so this should not be a problem, but you do need to be precise. What is simultaneous contrast? This is the only one that people really kind of screw up on, and it's because they're not very precise about it. This phrase, simultaneous contrast, is spoken about specifically in the textbook. So pay attention to what that says. All this other stuff you already know pretty well. And Roy G. Biv, we're talking about visible radiation, and that has been around for about 14.7 billion years. Even though even though colors have been around since the heat birth of the universe, blue didn't exist in European language until about 2,600 years ago.
Hmm.
And that is after the Etruscans had already been using it in everything they were doing, and the Mycenaeans for well over 1,000 years. Nobody had written down a word associated with the color blue. I think that's interesting. The again answers right at the textbook. There are two main reasons. This is out of the textbook. I think there's lots of different reasons that people use found objects. If I see that you've written down two reasons, you're going to get points for it. And this, we're talking about color schemes. And on here, there's 7 different color schemes that are pictured, and I believe 8 that are mentioned. Yes, there are 8 that are mentioned, 7 that are pictured. You're only going to use each color scheme once, and there's one of them that you're not going to use. And I have to say that because sometimes people will do this, and the reason they get it wrong is that they use one twice, and you don't need to. You'll use each of the color schemes mentioned only once, and one of them you won't use at all. And then we're talking about applied and natural. And is human intervention, natural is no human intervention. So we look at this. Do you think this is applied or natural?
That right there, let's see. I'm thinking it might actually be like the colored leaves might actually be like what was the first one when it's like tampered with? Not tampered with, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, applied and
Applied,
natural
yes.
are two different.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think that might be applied.
yeah. Andy Goldsworthy is using natural materials, but the color is present because of human intervention. So yes, you're absolutely right. And so most of like this one's going to be talked about in textbook. By the way, the woman who did this, Betty Saar, is one of my all-time heroes. I just love. It doesn't matter. She could be reading a phone book on stage, and I think she's amazing. Like Jackie Chan. Doesn't
Mm.
matter what she does, it's going to be awesome. So I, she's one of my favorite artists. And then this, we're just talking about how color theory applies to psychology. So those are the 6 quizzes, and I'm not going through the whole thing. I'm just touching on the elements of the quiz that are most often missed by people. And again, you can take the quiz as many times as you need to in order to get a perfect score. I think you will notice that everything is graded except I haven't graded about half of the wire sculptures. If I met, if you saw your wire sculpture in the discussion for the class that's recorded, and I talked about it, I've been kind of dragging my feet because I want people to go back and change it. But I'm thinking I may just have to go and grade everything. I don't know. I just don't like doing that because a lot of the times people assume that is it. That's the last grade. But can you go back and rework and resubmit?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Up until the last moment of the class, you can keep reworking and resubmitting as many times as you need to. So, all right. Now we are going to look again. So, Caleb, do you have any questions about what we just looked at? Just running down on the quizzes and stuff like that.
No, I don't believe so.
Okay.
Actually, well, I do have one thing. Um, especially because I mean, I am in this boat. So, of course, we can use the textbook while we're doing the quiz, correct?
Yeah.
And are we able to, like, say, borrow the book, like, directly from the library for, like, a day or so? Or however long they let you?
All the textbooks that are at the library are supposed to be borrowed only while you're in the library.
Okay, that's good to know. Because that
So
will help me, and I'm sure a lot of other people that have had trouble getting um, the textbook online.
yeah, and there's also like 3 or 4 people that are having a hard time with transportation. And if you're in that boat of intersection where you can't get a textbook and you have bad transportation, then what I would say is, don't turn in the quiz and just take the 0 until you get to the library and just plan on spending a couple hours at the library and take all 6 of the quizzes. I mean, it's going
Uh,
to suck. Give yourself a milkshake afterwards, but you'll at least have them all done.
mhm. Oh, actually, since I'm planning on doing something like that, or mm, I might be able to work with either on my own or with some students. I'd be down to organize like um, getting my own like either scans or whatnot of some of the textbook. It might be a bit of work, but
Okay.
I'd be interested.
Okay. What I'm wondering is we have a discussion here. Okay. Share your structure with skin. And this discussion, you're supposed to post an image of this. But
Mhm.
if you guys want to use this discussion to talk about that, that'll be totally fine.
Cool.
Okay, so everybody, this is module 3, the discussion that says share your structure with skin. Use that to coordinate with Caleb and each other about um, sharing textbooks or whatever you need to. And if you guys want to give each other contact information, that is just fine. If you do give each other contact information, after you contact each other, tell me, and I will remove that from the discussion.
Okay.
You know, so you don't have any personally identifying information.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound okay?
That sounds good to me. It was the share your structure with skin.
Yes. It's right here, module 3.
Okay.
Go down that this discussion, share your structure with skin. Well, there's two other things that I want to talk about. One is the annotated bibliography, which is module 7B. The most common problem that people have had why they're not getting perfect points is they don't have their citations in alphabetical order. All the citations need to be in alphabetical order, and number comes first, then the letters. Matching phrases ending with a period are always matched first. Anything beyond that is extra. For example, if you have two articles, one article is called Andy Goldsworthy, period, and the other article is Andy Goldsworthy nature, then even this is something that I noticed sometimes AI will screw up and put those in different things because it sees the colon as coming before the period. And when you're alphabetizing, what is actually the proper way to alphabetize is Andy Goldsworthy period always comes before Andy Goldsworthy plus something else, and then the period. So, and if you guys have any questions, talk to me or talk to somebody at the writing lab and they can help with that. And the only reason I'm bringing it up is your AI will tell you something different. So look at, you know, the first letter, the first phrase. If you have any questions, talk to me. But it's usually something like today I went through all of them and about half of them had that problem. So they missed like 5 points. And all you got to do is go back in, take what you did, and put it in alphabetical order, and then resubmit it. And then you get all the points. So not a big deal. The other thing I've noticed is that a few people have not put a period after the accessed on date phrase, that phrase, always put a period at the end. And anybody that made that, did that, I just put a little note in so you can fix that and resubmit it as well. So I overall I was pretty impressed with what people did for the annotated bibliography. You guys are really good thinkers. I appreciate that. And if anybody doesn't understand what the directions are, talk to me. I am more than happy to do like a FaceTime or a Teams call with you and walk you through the assignment. I'm happy to do that. Most everybody's been able to understand it. Looking at those examples during class discussion really helped quite a bit. And again, if you're missing any points, just look at what I wrote, rework it, resubmit, and if I don't respond right away and update your points, just drop me a line, email me. So, all right, so that is one. And then another thing that I'm noticing is that each of the modules have a background section, and then immediately after that, an artist review section. The background section, you have 4 to 8 artists that are doing stuff that is specific to what we're exploring in the module. And whenever you do an artist review, it always has to be drawn from the artist in that background. And I've said that several times, and there's still a couple of people that don't really understand that. They'll do artist review on either artists from the textbook or artists from other modules. Wherever the artist review is, it needs to be um, in relationship to the artist in the background portion of the same module. Whatever the artist review is, the background artist, they are tied together. All right. That's pretty, I hope that that is very clear. And if that's not the case, I mean, if somebody doesn't do that way, they don't get the points, and I will say something, just go back and fix it. And then, and again, I don't mind if you use AI to help you outline something, but for these kinds of things, it is a demonstration of your thought processes. So it needs to be your thinking and your words. So do not use AI to do this for you. And if you do use AI to outline, just mention that as well in like the comment section of the assignment. Just say, hey, I had AI use me. I used AI to help me put together an outline. That is
Mm-hmm.
totally, as long as you're honest about it, doesn't bother me at all. All right, so I hope that that makes a lot of sense there. And in module 4, one thing that we're doing, the artist review here. So I'm going to change this really quick. There we go. The artist review here, when you do this, this is a little bit bigger artist review. But notice each of the artist reviews have these prompts where it says paragraph number, and then what are you supposed to write about in that? And in this, notice right here, I say embed an image of the piece you write about. And that's worth 5 points out of the 20 points. Embed an image. So, put together a Word doc and have a picture, put it in there. If you're missing the picture, you don't get the points. And then I make a little note, redo the Word doc, embed that picture in it, and then send it back, resubmit it. And then you get the points. No problem at all.
Mm-hmm.
But look at this. How many paragraphs are you supposed to write?
Total of around 5,
Exactly.
or at least what it says here, because it says
Yep.
paragraph 1, paragraph 2 to 5.
Yep, exactly. And the paragraphs here, most of the time, paragraphs are 3 to 5 sentences. Um, as long, I would say, don't go less than 2 sentences. Write at least 2 sentences for each of these. And the paragraphs 2 to 5, what you're doing in number 1 is you're talking about the artwork that you're picking, and it has to be from one of these 5 artists in the module, in the background section, and talk a little bit about it. Then in paragraph 2, you're addressing how the artist used exterior and interior forms. Paragraph 3, primary and secondary contours. Paragraph 4, positive and negative forms. Paragraph 5, static and dynamic forms. The easiest way to write these paragraphs is write 1 sentence on exterior, 1 sentence on interior. Next paragraph, paragraph number 3, 1 sentence on primary, 1 sentence on secondary, and go through and do that. And what you may, if you're having a hard time getting enough paragraphs or doing the writing, what I would recommend is sit down with somebody, have the picture that you can show it to them, and then talk through this with them and explain to them what they're seeing. And then that will help you an awful lot to get this done. So for full points, 5 paragraphs. Each paragraph covers exactly what it says, how I describe it, and you embed an image of the piece you're writing about. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
All right, excellent. And again, if you miss them and you don't get the points you want, look at what I said and then go back and fix it. Not a problem. And again, with the structure and skin, the rest of the time we have about a little less than 40 minutes. So I'm going to talk about this a little bit because we did talk about it last week. Everybody go back and review that. But then I want to talk about the biomorphic abstraction and just get your brain going on that. Because I want to give that to you now so you have time to think about it, and then we'll talk about it more. later on. So these, I'm looking forward to seeing some of these turned in on Sunday so we can start talking about them next week. That I think it'll be pretty exciting. So for this, what we are doing is creating geometric structures. We're not making organic forms, we're making geometric structures, and they are regular repeating geometric structures because we're making 5 to 8 of the same module, and they're about baseball size. Then we're going to put them to, and each of these modules we're going to put paper on, not all over the whole thing, but maybe not even covering it halfway, maybe just a third. But we're using just enough paper on it so that the paper both hides the the sticks that are on the far side of the paper and it frames the sticks that are on the near side of the paper. An example of that is you can see right here, this paper is behind this these sticks. And the reason why we're doing both of those is we want people to view these and be engaged with both the structure and the paper that we're using or the skin. And when you put these modules together, you need to put them together in such a way that the volume of space around the object is activated. So I'm going to say a couple things really that are very important for everybody to remember. One is we are not making a line. You're not going to make a straight tower. You're not going to make a wall. You're not going to make a fan that fans out on the ground. This is something that needs to be three-dimensional. So it comes up and it addresses the space all around it. That is the primary reason why these three objects are shown, because even though they are varyingly successful with the assignment, I think the middle one is the best example. All three of them do a really good job of activating three-dimensional space around them. Now, this object on the left, it is not, if you look down from the top, this top box on the left is farthest away from us. This box in the middle is closest to us, and the box on the right top is leaning away from us as well. And you can kind of see how it's stacked and it turns around a little bit, but it activates the volume of space all the way around it. This is not a straight up tower, and it's not flat, and it's not a wall. On this one, it spirals one way and then spirals the other way. This is a great example of activating space. And this one on the far right, it looks like a snake that got caught while it was still shedding its skin and flopping around. It is very much engaging the volume of space around it. Is that understandable? Does that seem pretty clear?
Hmm.
Okay. So
Yes,
nothing
I actually do
vertical.
have a question.
Yes.
Actually, do have a question with the modules. How? Mm, Obviously, we don't want them to be completely flat, but do we necessarily want it to always be like if it had skin, it would be like a full-on polygon? Because like I'm kind of getting the I'm not entirely sure. Like
Yeah.
I'm a little confused at like what these modules are supposed to be. Um,
They're all supposed to
but
be three-dimensional forms
mhm,
that are geometric. All right.
okay.
This is why this one on the right is not a good example. The module is not consistent. There is not a physical structure to the module. They're just these trapezoids.
I see.
And these two, I think, are both pretty good module wise, except the one on the left, I think, has too much skin between the viewer and the far side of the object. And the one in the middle, I think, is a great balance.
Mhm.
Just enough skin to make it intriguing without getting you frustrated.
Yeah. Mostly
And
I ask just because like the current idea I have is if it's folded flat, is like say for example for me. I hope this is all right for me to bring up. But so I've got an idea of like a square or quadrilateral, probably an equilateral chart. Actually, I have sketches. I don't know how well you can see them, but like if
okay.
you can't see them, let me know.
Yeah, they almost look so you have a couple squares and you have a triangle.
Yes, and then I'd like fold them so that like from one angle it kind of looks a little more triangular. I don't know. I'm
I think
figuring it out.
as long as you're folding it so it makes it form in three-dimensional space, that's a good
Hmm.
module.
Okay.
You were saying flat, it can't be flat. It needs to
Yeah,
have three-dimensional
absolutely not.
structure. And so
Yeah.
let me show you something really quick. And this is why I include this resource on this assignment page right here, polyhedra.net. That's the same link that you had at the
Hmm.
very beginning of the class.
That's all right.
And if we look at this, I don't want you to do something this complicated or this complicated. I think those would be terrible. But looking at shapes like a tetrahedron, four-sided pyramid, or a cube, or an octahedron, all those are pretty good shapes to start working with. And you don't have to have all the sizes be completely regular. One person last semester made one where their tetrahedron, the base was about half the size of the other triangles, and the other triangles were really long and skinny. So it ended up looking almost like a geometric carrot.
Hmm.
And that was great because they used this to work with. And this Archimedean solid, this is a pretty good shape, but it starts getting to a point where it might be a little bit too complicated to make 5 to 8 of
Hmm.
them. You look at something like this. This is a really nice uniform polyhedra. I like this, and it even suggests where it might maybe putting the skin would be a good idea. Something like this, another pyramid
Hmm.
would be a good
Yep.
shape. This is a good shape. This is a good shape. What are not good shapes are none of these. Don't do these. This is not a good shape. This is way too flat. This is way too flat. This might be kind of an interesting shape. I kind of like these. This might be really intriguing to work with. This not so much because this is a three-dimensional ribbon. These are not concrete shapes.
Hmm.
It's
Thinking
still
about it, my concept is kind of more like if like a pyramid had two of the sides as like obtuse triangles almost.
because I'm getting
So,
from that drawing, it's making me think more of this kind of a shape
mhm.
as opposed to this kind of a thing.
Yep.
So it's really, really kind of interesting. And going through this, like this is more of that kind of milk crate type box that we saw on the left-hand side example.
Hmm.
Um, like this kind of a shape. I say don't do any of these. Don't do these. Don't do these. This might be kind of interesting, but a little bit complicated. This would be a really cool shape to do, or a really cool form. These might be interesting, but a little bit complicated. These might be really cool. These prism forms
Hmm.
might be kind of neat. Something like this, I don't like this. And the reason why I don't like this is because it requires a lot more skin. We want to play with a balance of skin and structure. And this, you're not going to see a lot of the structure, right? Because it's a cylinder, you have to use a lot of skin. So I'd say don't do this. And no Pac-Man for a similar reason. This might be interesting, but this is the same shape as right up here, the tetrahedron.
Hmm.
So is that making sense now?
Yes, it's making a lot of sense actually.
Okay. And you don't have to restrict yourself to those forms, but I think that's a really good starting off point. And again, this middle one, they didn't restrict themselves to those forms. It looks to me like they started making something of a tetrahedron over here, and then they attached two sides of the tetrahedron to a long triangle. And so the form is distinct, it's unique, but it's based on that kind of geometry. And I think this is great. And you can also see on this one, they have this form, and then two of the triangles, they have paper. And they just made a whole bunch of forms that look exactly like that. And that's how this whole structure is built. So, I think that's a really good solution. And for the most part, everybody's doing really good regarding the time element of all the modules. But if you make something and it's less than half the time that I'm suggesting that it should take you, I will put a note in there because the point of this class is not to get through it as fast as possible. The point of the class is to learn something. I don't know if any
Hmm.
of you are old enough to have watched Batman Remembers or Batman Forever. Watching that movie,
I'm
that's when I cut off
familiar.
the tip of this finger right here. But so it holds a special place in my. I don't know. Every time I think of it, I enjoy the movie, but it just makes me feel nauseated because I remember what that felt like to lose that finger. Anyway, gross. But in that, the Riddler totally beats the snot out of Batman, and then Two-Face wants to kill him, and then Jim Carrey's character says, "No, if we kill him, he won't learn nothing." So,
That's right.
none of the grades are permanent or anything like that. I want you guys to revisit this stuff when you need to, and then change what we talk about so that whatever you produce is stronger and better moving forward. So on Wednesday next week, we're going to look at what people have turned in. So do your best to get as much of it as done as possible. If it's not all the way done, submit what you have anyway, so we have something to talk about.
Hmm.
And then, and most of these things, most of these projects, um, people have to turn in more than once anyway, because I'm not there with you. I'm not standing next to you telling you or suggesting what tweaks to make. The only way I can do that is if you turn in something, I look at it and comment on it. All right, so now for this, when we talk about biomorphic abstraction, bio means life, morphic means moving or having to do with motion. So we're looking for stuff that has to do with the activity of life, at least relating to it on some realm. And abstraction means we're simplifying. This is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. This is one of the oldest surviving ivory sculptures made by people that look like us on the planet. This is made by our ancestors 35 to 40,000 years ago, which is at the height of the cave paintings in Europe and South America and Zimbabwe and Australia and elsewhere on the planet. Wherever this is made by our ancestors that long ago. Now, when we look at this, what are some of the things that we recognize about this? It looks to me like it is wanting to be a humanoid figure. And I say that because it's standing upright. Our ancestors were smart enough to know what an animal looked like and what a person looked like. There's no doubt about that. Some of those cave paintings, the paintings of animals are so precise that biologists today can identify the subspecies of the animals being depicted because they are so precise.
Wow.
So our ancestors were not only super smart, but they are also familiar with ideas of realism and photorealism. Okay, because they were so accurate in their things. So looking at this, as with all art, what we've got to first decide is that the person did this because this is what they intended, not because they were dumb, not because they didn't know any better. All right, this is what they intended. So we look at this, it's a human-like form, except the legs are kind of short and stockier than typical humans. The torso is really, really long. And this head does not look like a typical human head. You look at the placement of the ears. This, I believe, is called the lion totem. And it looks very much as if a lion is turning into a human being, or perhaps the other way around. And I love that. There's a lot of expression to it.
Very anthropomorphic.
Yes, very much so. But it is not worried about being precisely naturalistic to either a human being or an animal. This is a good example of that biomorphic abstraction. You see elements of living things, lion's face, a paw, kind of structure of fusion between a lion's hindquarters and a human leg. We can see a lot of those kinds of things, but the person simplified it and distorted it and stylized it in different ways to make something unique. So definitely watch all three of these videos. And this one is really cool because it talks about how the Lion Man was made. But another good example of these are the Venus sculptures or Venus votaries is another term for them. that are all over the ancient world that were made at about the same time period. So what we're going to be doing is creating something like this using the foam and carving the foam. Now, we only have about 20 minutes left. I want to share this with you. So I'm going to go through the rest of this really quickly, and then we'll come back to sharing um, the little PowerPoint presentation I've made. So this is several artists. I think there's 4 or 5 that Constantine Brancusi is amazing. All these artists are incredible. Salman Noguchi, they're all pretty dang amazing. Of course, one of my favorites is Barbara Hepworth. There is a certain visual poetry to what she produces that I find is just astounding. And it looks like this. What's interesting is that this video was working just a little while ago. It's not working now. It's not working. Let me know and I will get it fixed, or I'll find another one. Okay. Again, this is what we talked about just a little while ago. It's that same artist review. You deal with those 5 artists. This is the quiz we talked about just a second ago. And now we get to the assignment. A lot of this stuff, I'm giving you references to, and this is a demonstration of how to carve the foam and stuff like that. Some of this talks about carving in wood, some of it in plaster, but what we're looking at is just the process of carving to make a form. And these are the kinds of forms that we're going to be dealing with. Now, these do not look like anything in the real world, but to me, there's elements of knuckles and hip bones in this. And in
I
this
was
one,
actually getting
what?
I was actually getting kind of like almost pelvis vibes with the
Yeah, yeah,
holes in the middle.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, very much so. And this, I think, looks like a fusion of a couple different ideas, like mollusks, both squid forms and maybe seashells, where they're kind of
Mm.
dealing with both of those ideas.
I'm reminded of like old fashioned like candy making,
Yeah,
like
like
taffy
happy
almost.
pulling. Yeah, exactly. So, and that's it. That's how all of these are. This, I think, goes back to the bone kind of form again. This looks very much like parts of a tooth almost. But all of these, they're drawn from organic material, but they're not designed to look like something specific. So I'm going to go through, this is something I put together, and we're going to go through it relatively quickly. If you have any questions, Caleb, just spout them out to me. But I'm going to demonstrate just a little bit of the shift of thinking when we go from naturalistic or realism to abstraction. And as the title suggests, we're going to be looking at different trees. So this tree is fairly naturalistic. Yeah, it is abstracted a little bit, but for the most part, it's pretty naturalistic. This is a good example of Hudson River School painting. And again, these are romanticized a bit, but still, the trees, the mountains, all the organic material in here still looks quite a bit naturalistic. Now, this is where we start going into less naturalism and more towards stylization in the idea of abstraction. Remember, abstraction is when you are,
So, oh, I thought you were pausing because you wanted me to answer.
no, no. Abstraction is
Sorry.
when we're pulling away from all the effort that makes it naturalistic. We're simplifying. And if we look at this, there's a lot of simplification going up, but because the forms are repeated and they almost look like they're printed, then this is something that we would talk about more as stylized instead of abstracted. Very rare that we're going to see birds completely still. Very rare that all the flowers are going to be either perfect half views or perfect straight on views. And I have never seen a natural plant where every single leaf was completely flat. In fact, if I saw this in real life, it'd freak me out. So this is very much stylized. Still reads as a tree, but this is so much more naturalistic. Now we go down here. yeah, we can still identify this as a tree easily. I believe this is the flag of New Hampshire. But Caleb, how would you react if you were out walking and you actually saw a tree that looked exactly like this? All flat green, just the silhouette. Would that be a little freaky to see it in a forest setting?
I'd be very surprised, yes.
Yeah. And this is where we're starting to move little bit past stylization towards a little bit of abstraction. And the color is really simplified, the form is more simple. And then when we get here, this is
Kanji.
yeah, we're looking very much. This is kanji for tree, and it is very much abstracted. And the biggest difference is we can still see this and read this and think about it as a tree, but here we're missing a lot of the context if we don't already understand about kanji and what it means. And you can kind of see the vertical trunk if I point it out, and you can see the lines of the silhouette in the sloping branches. So your vertical trunk, sloping branches, but it is incredibly simplified to the point where instead of painting it, they're almost drawing just the simplest lines with the brush to communicate the idea. And then we have the horizon here. But I just think that is really, this is a good example as we move more fully into abstraction. So looking at this, if we talk about our lettering, is lettering more naturalistic or abstracted? A, B, C, all that is very much more abstracted, and some of it may have its roots in the physical world, but for the most part, lettering, typography it fits into the realm of non-objective abstraction because it's not based on physical world parallels. It's based on sometimes ideas of what a sound might look like, but we don't see a sound in the natural world, so it's hard to uh,
Mhm.
that's where we get the term non-objective because there isn't an object that it's attached to. Now, this is a full abstracted tree. These are a couple stand-up poplars, and if you know that these are poplars, and you know that green usually means tree, then you can kind of see the trees there. But it is incredibly abstracted. We have to be told what it is,
Mhm.
or guess at the setting before we know what it is. And then this is even more so. And this is Mondrian. This is actually a landscape at a park. And I said this before, and people said, "Oh, you're so full of crap because this wasn't a landscape. This is just lines he liked." Mondrian would paint every line that he saw. He would paint either vertical or horizontal. Didn't matter what angle it was. And he would simplify all the colors he saw to only one of four. The primary colors in green, usually. And this is actually a landscape of a park where we have this vertical line in the middle or horizontal line in the middle. This is going to be the horizon line. This line up at the top is going to be a cloud. Down here, these are the footpaths, the grass and stuff like that, the pond in the park. And these vertical lines are going to be people walking or trees. And he just continues the line all the way out. Now, if you don't believe me, that's fine. But look at here. This is over a span of about 15 years as he went from very much Van Gogh abstract expressionism all the
Mhm.
way to what we know and love about Pete Mondrian's Jugendstil. And you can kind of see
Wow.
how each step of the way he's simplifying and taking more of the diagonals away, removing a lot of the naturalistic color, doing different things until he gets to this point where this is inspired by the same tree as this. Isn't that fascinating?
Wow.
But if you don't have that context, you look at this, you'd say, oh, yeah, that's very much not objective because that's what it looks like. It doesn't look like anything in the real world. But in Pete Mondrian's mind, he's still working with trees and landscapes. I just think stuff like that is really fascinating. Now, when you do your thing, instead of going Pete Mondrian, we are still very much looking for organic forms and shapes and slopes. And Caleb, right, like when you said, I said hip bone, you said pelvis. We're thinking the same thing. This, it looks to me like the person is thinking of mesas or plateaus, but I also see things like this looks to me like the left knee of somebody getting ready to kneel down. This almost looks like a torso. This makes me think of um, forms moving through space, that Italian futurism sculpture. I can't remember who. Let me see if I can find out who. I'll see if I can find a picture of it. Let's see if we can find this. Okay, here we go. So this is what it makes me think of, the Italian futurists. And I think that that is just very interesting. And this, the person started with a human walking, but in the sculpture itself, they took different elements of different portions of that movement and cast it into bronze. And so it becomes abstract to the point you still see its relationship to organic forms because there aren't any crisp straight lines. They're all kind of curving and making some interesting shapes. But like this is the calf when he first started walking. This is calf as he on his other foot as it's moving. This is the knee as he's completed the step. Do you know what I mean? It's all taken from different portions of the entirety of the movement. And I think that is pretty amazing. So, and that's what makes me think this person is on the process of kneeling down and turning around, but it looks to me like it's the same kind of processing of different elements of the human form. And I think that's fascinating. Here, it looks to me like this sculpture is they're taking how the pelvic girdle kind of cradles the torso, and they're kind of playing with that idea a little bit more and almost making this into like a cup. But I still see those kind of irregular folds and forms that I'd see in like a natural bone pelvis. I think that that's really amazing. And this, it seems to me like this is almost part of a spine, like a vertebra, but it's smoothed out to the point where it's almost like a jellyfish or something. And I think
Hmm.
that just is really amazing. So these are the kinds of forms I want you to think about as you're considering. They're all based on real world organic forms, but none of them are have any one-to-one correspondence with those forms. They're all people picking out what they like about different things, what they want to use in different things, and putting them together in a new way. So, and that's what I want you to have in the back of your mind as you get ready to do the carving. I do got to warn everybody, when you do the carving, it is with high density foam, but I don't know if you've ever worked with any kind of foam. Have you ever gotten anything from Amazon where they packed it with styrofoam? Because that styrofoam does not want to give up any sort of cling to anything. I mean, it will go absolutely everywhere. That's how dangerous this high density foam is when you're carving it. So do it somewhere. I when I did it, I actually got a sheet from Desert Industries that was only like $1 or so, and I put that underneath me. And when I did it, I also had clothes that I got from DI that I wore. Now I went to Ace and I got a repurposed set of overalls that used to belong to an auto mechanic named Billy. And I put that on. And then, I do the carving. I take that off as I carefully step off the sheet. I kind of put everything up together, kind of holds all the static cling together so the foam doesn't get all over the apartment. And then when I go back to recarve it, I just clean it up again.
Yep.
What does get rid of the cling is I also have a spray bottle, and I use the spray bottle on the table surface that I work on, and then as I was doing the final cleanup, I used the spray bottle to get the crumbs of styrofoam off of my overalls and also off the sheet that I had used as a drop cloth.
Hmm.
So I think mess wise, this carving is the worst experience. But as you
I'm
go into
definitely
the
gonna keep a
carving,
vacuum handy.
As you go into this sculpture, as you're going to be carving, there's a couple of things to be mindful of. None of the 6 flat surfaces of the foam block should be showing when you're all done. All of them have to be carved away and altered at some level. So no original flat surfaces. Another is you are not making a one-to-one image or object of anything in the real world. You're combining different elements that you see, like an earlobe, a tooth from a goat that you found on the road, or you found pictures online of a sea urchin or a sea squid or a sea slug. You're combining elements that you like from those different things. You're not making a sea urchin. You're not making a tooth. All right. One of those objects I showed you was actually inspired. The person had a couple kids who lost their teeth, and they were just intrigued by some of the shapes in those teeth, and that informed a lot of how they made their object. So again, you're not doing a one-to-one correspondence. So remember that none of the original surfaces of the block, and no one-to-one correspondence with the real world. All right, does that make sense?
Mhm.
And we'll revisit that again next week. We're going to go through what people have turned in, look at stuff, and then we'll talk again about the carving. All right. Okay, that's all I needed to slog through today. Thank you
All
very
right.
much for your patience and your fortitude. Uh, do you have any questions or observations about anything that we discussed?
Mm, I don't think so, no.
Okay. All right, excellent. Thank you very much, Caleb, for being with me this week. And everybody else, when you watch this, remember to turn in the 5 things that you learned, noticed, or thought about while we were doing this. Actually, no, I guess learned and noticed are the 2 best things. Somebody actually complimented me on the shirt today.
Oh.
I I bought it. I usually buy my shirts from Easy Hippie on
Mm.
Amazon. They're all handmade by families in Nepal and Tibet. But this one was actually made in the Middle East, and I just really
Oh,
like the
cool.
texture. I love the color. So very, very nice shirt. And somebody told me today that I look good in it, which I thought on the surface was a nice compliment. And then I
Hmm.
thought, are you implying that I look terrible every other day? They weren't. That was just
Mm.
where my head goes. But all right, I hope you have a good week and
Hmm.
weekend, and I will look forward to seeing you on Wednesday.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right, we'll see you.